right, welcome to the New Orleans Jazz Museum. We're so grateful to have you here. On the behalf of New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, we are so grateful to have this partnership with the New Orleans Jazz Museum to present Talkin' Jazz with Fred Kasten. We usually have this series once a month here at this museum, and the premise is to highlight New Orleans-based musicians and their studies, their music, their performance. And Fred Kasten is just such a wonderful gentleman and interviewer, and he really gets to the depth of what these musicians bring here. So we've been inviting wonderful musicians here, and we have a wonderful trio today. So I'm going to get out the way and let Fred Kasten do a better introduction than I. And he's going to bring up the Brad Walker Trio. Welcome them up.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. Great to see everyone here in the new year as we get the 2023 part of the Talkin' Jazz in Concert series underway. And we have today the services of three very accomplished artists who make music, each of them with passion and an adventurous spirit. And they'll bring that to bear on the work you'll hear this afternoon. We'll find out more as the afternoon goes on about how they came to do what they do. But first, let's let them do it and show us what that is. So please welcome to the stage our New Orleans rhythm master and orchestrator par excellence at the drum kit, Mr. John Vidakovich. Our ace of bass on both acoustic and electric. He'll play acoustic for us today, an accomplished composer and band leader as well, Matt Booth. And our man on the saxophones today, great player, wonderful composer, and he as well plays in a wide range of musical ensembles, leads some of them as well as he is doing here this afternoon. Please welcome Mr. Brad Walker, the Brad Walker Trio.
Thank you, Fred. Give it up for Fred Kasten. Nothing more precious than someone really devoted to spreading the word about great music. So appreciate Fred and all the work he does in this community to get music heard. Fred asked me to put together a trio today, and I have a long-standing, creatively oriented project with Matt here. And I thought that would be perfect. And we've paired it with a number of different drummers over the years. And we couldn't think of anyone better to share the music we've developed together than Johnny. So I'm looking forward to playing for you all today.
The Brad Walker Trio, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, John Bodakovich at the drums, Matt Booth, our bass player, and Mr. Brad Walker with the tenor saxophone work and handling some of the electronics. Brad, you grew up outside of Hendersonville, North Carolina. You weren't hearing music like what you just played in Hendersonville, I'm pretty sure. But you told me that your earliest experience with music was mostly as a listener. That you did start.
Yeah, no offense to my folks who were probably watching, but I kind of grew up in the sticks, so to speak, which I'm perfectly happy with and proud of. But yeah, we grew up kind of on the outskirts of a small town, so mix of rural and suburban, I would say. And yeah, so I didn't grow up around musicians like we were talking about, or around music in the way we have it here. But there was a lot of music in our house when I was growing up, particularly thanks to my dad. But
Yeah, he'd grown up in Birmingham, you said, and they could hear New Orleans radio stations or New
yeah,
Orleans
we talked
music.
about that last time. I thought that was kind of cool. It was the era of kind of like regional radio. So you heard a lot of music from New Orleans. He would maybe be able to correct me on this, but from what I understand, more so than from, say, Detroit or Los Angeles, you know.
Yeah. So you got a nice representation of music off the radio and such, and the record collection. You yourself started playing in 6th grade clarinet. What made you pick up the clarinet?
Well, I had to pick something. Yeah, like, I just didn't, I don't know, like, I mean, the thing that occurred to me many years later when I found myself living this life that we all get to live now, and that I feel like, pioneer, I don't know if pioneer is the right word, but Johnny's one of the great, trailblazers of, to me, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word either, but we'll have to ask him. But I just didn't know doing this was an option. Or maybe I would have picked that a long time ago. But, so yeah, I just started in 6th grade on clarinet because I had to pick between that and dance and drama and orchestra, and that sounded like a little bit more fun. So, you know what I mean? And then suddenly I remember sitting on the back steps at the house. We lived in the middle of the woods. You can't see anyone's house from our house in the summer when the leaves are on the trees. I remember sitting on the back porch, squawking along on clarinet in the middle of the afternoon, much to the chagrin of the forest animals that could hear us.
Yeah. Your folks were just happy it wasn't oboe or bassoon that you'd picked.
I don't know if they were happy at all, but I guess they were happy I was practicing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What did you like, though, clarinet, once you got past the squeak and squawk age?
Well, I liked switching to saxophone. That's the main thing I liked about the clarinet.
Setting it aside.
My band director, I was very lucky to go to a small town, small high school, small middle school, but a really great, nationally accredited music program. Fran Shelton was our music director, and she was smart enough to realize that if she let people pick what they wanted to pick, she'd end up with 38 saxophones, 8 flutes, and 28 drummers. So limited number of percussionists. If you wanted to play saxophone, you had to start on clarinet or flute. You could switch after a year if you proved to her that you meant business. And a lot of people didn't switch because once you get used to playing an instrument for a year, you stick with it. But I switched.
And what did you pick up, the tenor?
I did. I switched straight to tenor.
Yeah.
I think because there were less people on it, so I kind of got to do my own thing. But
And you immediately liked that better?
I did, yeah, and I felt like, as children often are, I was attracted to it because I had an aptitude for it. Like, I wasn't necessarily good at anything in particular, but I felt like, I can do this. I'm all right at this, and that was enough. I think at the age of, I don't know how old you are, in 6th, 7th grade, 12.
Yeah.
That was enough to get me to practice and start. My mom signed me up for saxophone lessons with a retired military saxophone player who I think was an accountant in his regular life, but taught lessons, bought me a Michael Brecker book, and I'm like, who the hell is that? I don't like this stuff, but cool. Very first thing he ever had me learn was a transcription of Coleman Hawkins's classic Body and Soul, which again was way over my head, but cool to get exposed to.
Great
that.
place to start, though.
I think so, yeah. I didn't think so at the time, but
Looking back. Well, did any of these folks that you were coming in contact with, your teachers or even other students, have a hint about jazz, or did that even come into your world at that point?
Not really. You know, we had a little bit in the house. We had Kind of Blue, we had Miles Davis Quintet cooking, and we had Lush Life. It was a pretty good start. But you know, I just wasn't around people that played that kind of music. So of course we had a jazz ensemble because that's something high school music programs do. But I don't know that it was something I really was able to wrap my head around for a very long time. I've always been interested in improvisation, but I didn't really get a handle on that lineage of music really till I came down here. But
You tell me you were more interested as a teenager than in possibly writing, or certainly in literature, than in music.
well, we were talking. So like doing interviews are strange in a way. Like I don't feel like I have all that interesting of a story to tell. I'm really glad Fred asked me to talk to him and talk to y'all. But so I was trying to think about like, okay, what about my story would be interesting to anyone other than people I know personally? And so I think the only thing is that like, you know, I really believe each of us kind of has a path to walk in life, and there's a person inside of us that we believe ourselves to be, and that it's best for everyone if we follow that, you know, path and sort of idea of who we are and who we're meant to be as closely as we can, like to learn what that is and follow it as closely as possible. And so the only thing that I think makes my story interesting at all is that it just took me a really long time to figure out what that was. I spent, you know, I didn't want to join band. I got a really great music scholarship to Louisiana State University, which is one of the ways I ended up in Louisiana. And I was planning on changing majors after one semester. They told me because it was a music scholarship, I had to stick with it for one semester, and then I could switch. And I was going to switch to English, and then I never switched. You know, and I left music altogether when I finished college and moved to New York and taught school with Teach for America. Taught special needs math and science in inner city Brooklyn. Didn't touch the horn for 3 years. It was just like I was trying to get away from it, and finally I just realized. That's just for better or worse. It's really who at least I think I am. You know.
It wasn't letting you go.
No, it really. I tried. I
You
tried
did
so
your-
hard.
You did your best.
I moved halfway across the country and took a job and put my horn in the closet, and it just, you know, after the end of that, no more questions for me. It's like this is what I'm doing.
So what did you? No, you had majored in music.
I
then
did major in
at
music. Yep. I
LSU.
did stick with it. Yep.
Yeah, were you teaching music or something else?
No, I did a program called Teach for America where they recruit college students of all disciplines to
Right.
commit to teaching 2 years in an underserved area. You know, I really wanted to make a difference and do something meaningful with my life. And that's one of the lessons I learned is that is a very meaningful thing to do with your life, but it wasn't the right thing for me.
Right.
And much as I wanted it to be, I'm not cut out to be a middle school science teacher, unfortunately. Or really a music teacher, I have learned.
Uh-huh.
So,
But what was your next move then to get back into music? How'd you do that?
well, first I had to get really unhappy. Like I was miserable. It was amazing. You know, I was like living my dream in some ways. I had a beautiful, wonderful partner. I lived in a cool apartment in the coolest city in the world in this super hip neighborhood in Brooklyn. I had a great job, and I was miserable. You know, and like what? You know, like really like dangerously unhappy. And I think that's just a sign to like. It's just a sign to you that you need to figure out why. You know, and I just realized at this time I was working at the Strand, this great bookstore in Manhattan. So I wasn't playing though. The Strand is full of, you know, no one who works at the Strand is a professional bookstore clerk, with some exceptions. They're actors, you know, dramatists, poets, authors, musicians, painters. Like my first record cover, I got a guy I used to work with there to do some original art for me because that's what he does. And so I was around people like that, and working in a bookstore with, you know. I worked in the basement in nonfiction, so like I was around books on spirituality and Carl Jung, and you know, as I'd finish my work early and poke around in books and just like, what the hell is going on? Why am I so unhappy? You know, and stumbled upon this idea of like individuation and identity, and you know, it just clicked. It's like I can't do, you know, this is who I am, or who at least who I think I am. So my thing was like, I got to give this music thing a shot. I have to. So I'm gonna go back to Louisiana. Well, I thought about doing cruise ships as well. I ended up not doing that, but go back to Louisiana, go back to graduate school, and give this a real honest shot and fail at it so I could move on with my life. That was it.
Clear the decks.
It didn't work. You know what I mean?
You're
Like,
still
no,
here.
I'm still
well,
but if it's like, you know, by the time I got here, it was like, there was no questions. The question was not like, am I going to get there? The question is, what's it going to look like?
Yeah.
which I'm still wondering about. But you know, when the epiphany came, it was like I got to listen to this call because it's never going to leave me alone unless I listen to it.
The horizon may continue to recede a little bit, but you're still on that path.
Yeah, aren't we all on whatever path? Yeah.
Well, in New York, you hadn't played, but had you been listening to music?
Oh,
getting
Lord,
out?
that's all I did. That's one of the things that tipped me off. Like, I'd meet people, and I'm like, hey, I'm Brad. I play saxophone. And then so first of all, that's a lie. I didn't play saxophone. I didn't touch it for 3 years. And I spent all my time seeing music. All my money as well. I was at the Vanguard. I mean, I must have seen Paul Motion 20 times at the Vanguard because he played there all the time. And it was almost the only place he would play at that point in his career. You know, heroes of mine like Joe Lovano and Bill Frisell and Jason Moran. And then also at that time, John Zorn, if anyone's familiar, was running a little arts, like black box. It wasn't even a theater. It was just a room in Alphabet City on Avenue C and 2nd Street called The Stone. And it was staffed by volunteers. You show up, pay $20. You get there early. You can sit in the front row, just like the Village Vanguard. You get there early. Me and all the dorks from Berkeley and Juilliard get there and stand in line for an hour, and then we get to sit 5 feet from, you know, Paul or Brad Meldau, whoever was playing. But anyway, you know, I go to the Stone and see like David S. Ware and like some of the great avant-garde musicians that are like living legacies of that music. And I mean, that just changed my life, seeing people like that in person. I'd always been attracted to, like, I really love Zorn's music. We might play a piece of his later. But it's just something different to be around that community. And I wasn't in that community as a player, but I'd go to Downtown Music Gallery, this cool record store where they had all the weird stuff, you know, and I'm like, what should I check out, man? And then I'd go to the Stone and get to meet these people and see them play in person. I'd sit 5 feet from David S. Ware, who's one of my heroes, and listen to him play solo. And listen to him, he started his solo sets off by chanting and shaking prayer bells and chanting to Ganesha, you know, which when I moved here is somewhat similar to things I would see Tim Green do, you know. It made me realize, like, there's something here that speaks to me that you're never going to learn about in school. You just have to go, like, be a part of it, you know.
Well, you were developing as a musician, even though you weren't thinking of yourself as one.
That's a good lesson, right? Some of the most important learning takes place away from your instrument. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out.
So at LSU, you did jazz studies in the graduate level?
I studied classical saxophone as an undergraduate, and then when I reached out to my old teacher to ask him advice on where to go to graduate school, he said, well, you could go here, you could go here. This is Will Stilloney I'm talking about, who's still the director of jazz studies at LSU. He said, you could do this, you could do that, but we're starting a brand new, for the first time ever at LSU, which has historically had little to no jazz studies program whatsoever. We're starting a brand new jazz master's program, and we'd love for you to be one of the first students. And that is perfect for me in a number of ways, because I wasn't going to win any auditions. I hadn't played in 3 years, but I knew them. They trusted me. Yeah. And so I could say I'm good and get a decent assistantship so that I could sort of survive for a couple of years while I figured out how to do this. And, you know, didn't take too long before I realized this was the place to be, not Baton Rouge. But
did you get a chance, though, in the beginning there to play some outside of school in Baton Rouge? Were there some gigs available?
Well, when I was an undergraduate, not really. I did play in their jazz ensemble, but again, it was like, that's just what you do. You play in the marching band, you play in the concert band, you play in the jazz band. And it turned out I was okay at it. So like as a freshman, I got, you know, the solo chair in their jazz ensemble and stuff like that. But when I came back, my whole focus was like, I got to give this making a life and living. And that was what was important to me. It's like, I want to make a life out of this and a living doing this. It didn't really take that long. I mean, within about 5 months, I was making a living. I was playing blues bars and cover band gigs and party clubs and casinos and Dave's NASCAR Lounge in Denham Springs, Louisiana, and the T&T Lounge, not TNT, T&T in Baker, Louisiana. And it was like the coolest thing I'd ever done in my life until, you know, one day it wasn't, and I wanted to do some other stuff. But yeah, there's lots of gigs in Baton Rouge. This is a great music city, great music community, very different than here.
But you did start then coming here some too.
Yeah, I went to grad school with this guy named Jeff Albert.
Oh yeah.
You know Jeff. You guys probably know Jeff. If you don't, Jeff Albert's a great trombonist, composer, horn section leader, and at this point, academic, working at Loyola, all those things and more. But he was in grad school there, and Jeff's a natural mentor. And so Jeff, you know, heard me play, fumbling in the dark the way I was, you know what I mean? But he heard something and said, man, I got this music series called Open Ears. It's every Tuesday at Blue Nile. You should come down and do something. You should come down and put a show on. And then as we got to know each other better, he would say, same thing my friend Simon Lott used to say, who's another Baton Rouge person. He'd say, man, you should come to, there's a place for you there. You should come to New Orleans, which was kind of them, because I definitely didn't believe that. But yeah, they encouraged me to come down and check out the city, and they were right. This is a very welcoming place. I find that if you're willing to be respectful of the music and musicians that came before you. But
Yeah. Well, let's, speaking of music, let's hear some more from the trio.
I forgot all about that. Yeah, Matt picked a song while we were talking. I'm lying. He didn't pick a song.
I was thinking we would do
It's called Brainwashing. That was a deconstruction of a beautiful piece of music by the great songwriter Björk, Icelandic songwriter, called Bachelorettes. And we're going to continue with a composition of mine that I'm still looking for a title for, although at the moment we're calling it Aural Synths, A-U-R-A-L.
Aural Sense. Brad Walker's with the Brad Walker Trio. Brad, Matt Booth, John Vidakovich, ladies and gentlemen. Brad, what vintage is that? Is that something relatively new?
Yeah, kind of right before the pandemic,
Yeah.
but it's been developing.
Going to be a major time divider for those of us who lived
I
through
know,
that.
right? Yeah. Yeah, it was something I played around with before the pandemic, and then during the, work stoppage, shutdown for
Right.
us in our micro world here. Matt's project, along with a couple of other local standouts, Oscar Rossignoli and Brad Webb, which is called Extended. We had, just before things shut down, started a new collaboration. We played Tuesday in New Orleans at the Sidebar, Wednesday in Baton Rouge at the Quorum Hall series. Things shut down on Sunday.
Wow.
So when we got the chance to, we revisited that, and that's one of the first tunes we started dealing with.
Throw it out.
And
Yeah.
some other ones are about to be on a record that we have coming out very soon. But
Yeah. Have you got a release date on that yet?
if I get it to the printers today, we'll have one.
Oh,
That's one of
okay.
my jobs.
Very soon.
Yes. Spring. Yeah, probably
Spring.
March or April, yeah.
Well, great.
Fred Kasten will be one of the first people we get a copy for sure.
I'll be looking forward to that. Matt, Brad kind of edged his way on, found his way onto the scene here, partly through Jeff Albert's series at Blue Nile. You were involved with something kind of like that in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I lived in Pittsburgh for 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, and then I moved here in 2015. And yes, in Pittsburgh, I was involved for, 4 years with a Tuesday night music series similar to Open Ears, where it was like a weekly showcase for different bands, mostly in the jazz realm, but there were country bands that played and singer-songwriters and all sorts of other stuff. It was really just like the focus was on creative, original music.
Yeah. How did you get brought into that, or did you help instigate it?
I co-instigated it it was myself and 4 other folks, and it operated, I think, maybe for 5 years at a really cool Pittsburgh venue called the Thunderbird Cafe, and that was called the Space Exchange.
Yeah. What's the word? Thunderbird. What's the price? 30 twice. For those of you over 100 years old who remember that. Just under. Well, you're not from Pittsburgh, though. You were from Virginia, right?
Yeah, Northern Virginia, outside of D.C. That's where I was raised. Yeah.
How did you come to the bass? That is your first instrument, wasn't it?
I played drums like all throughout elementary school, and when myself and 2 of my really close friends that I'm still great friends with, we decided to start a band in 6th grade, and one of my other friends also played drums and refused to move to another instrument. So I got assigned to play bass. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea to play bass, but it was that was demanded upon me. So I started learning electric bass in 6th or 7th grade, and played in rock bands all throughout high school, and started playing upright bass when I was in college.
And where that was in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah,
College.
I went to college at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh.
Well, they had at one point they had a all jazz radio station at Duquesne.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. I think Tony Moad was the DJ.
Was
jazz
the guy
dude
that
that
he still
DJ'd
does
it.
some one of the networks that WWNO accesses for their HD3 jazz signal. Tony's still one of the I think several of them were involved with our Pittsburgh DJs. Probably.
Yeah.
What you're a music major at Duquesne?
I was. Yeah.
And so you started playing the acoustic then as part of those studies.
Yeah, basically, I obtained this bass when I was a senior in high school. This belonged to my uncle, and I was visiting my grandmother, and this bass was in her closet in disrepair. And I have listened to jazz all my life. My dad is a big jazz fan, so I've grown up listening to jazz. It was always an interest of mine to play it, but at that point, I just hadn't started learning upright yet. And so it was like a fortuitous thing to stumble upon this bass, and we had it restored and started really learning it in earnest in college. And yeah, just devoted a lot of time and energy into learning it and practicing it. And yeah.
One of the greatest jazz bassists of all time is from Pittsburgh, Ray Brown.
Yeah, there's a really rich history of jazz in Pittsburgh, and I guess similar to New Orleans, where there's a lot of emphasis placed on honoring and upholding the history of the music heritage there. Here, it's similar to there. There's a great drummer there named Roger Humphreys, who's kind of like the patriarch of the jazz scene in a similar way to I feel like what Ellis was to New Orleans. Roger kind of is to the Pittsburgh jazz scene, and he's still playing. I don't think this is still existing, but when I was still there, he was doing a weekly jam session, and it was a great way for music students and young jazz musicians to go up and play with great professional musicians, and usually get your butt kicked, but like a very productive butt kicking.
Right. Left a few marks, but it reminded you of what you needed to work on.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, yes.
Well, was jazz something that you were getting deeply into at that point, or had it been even before, while you were playing rock and roll?
Yes, jazz has always been something I've been deeply interested in as a listener. And like I said, my dad was born in 1936. So when he was a 20-something, jazz was a big deal. And him and all his beatnik friends would go out and see jazz all the time. Like he got to see Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and Charlie Mingus and John Coltrane and Dizzy Gillespie and all the greats. And he has a large record collection that from a very early age I was just pretty obsessed with. I just remember being obsessed with the records and opening them and taking the record out and looking at the track lists and all that stuff. And because of his age, he's got like a huge jazz collection and a huge rock collection. He bought a lot of records from the mid 50s to like the early 80s.
Oh yeah. Great.
Probably about when I was born is when he stopped buying records. I don't know if there's a correlation to that.
Well, not necessarily a correlation. But,
yeah.
So you were the beneficiary of a really well curated collection then.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And like I feel like my musical tastes and sensibilities were like very heavily informed by his. So I've just had like a deep respect and appreciation for a lot of great music in both the jazz and rock and pop umbrellas, I guess.
Well, were you writing songs for the bands you were playing in?
Yeah. I don't think I really wrote much lyrics, but I was always like tinkering around with parts and stuff I play guitar as well and write all the music that I write on guitar. So yeah.
Any of those tunes still in the book?
Yeah, I mean a lot. Like when I was in college, I wrote a lot of songs and didn't really understand what I was doing yet. Not that I still do, but some of those songs that I wrote in music school like are on extended albums, because there was a lot of songs that I wrote and just didn't really know what to do with, and I thought that they were like not good or not playable or stuff like that. And it really took moving here and starting to build relationships with musicians here, and starting to form projects where I was sort of like scavenging my composition collection and started to feel confident enough in the musicians that I was playing with that I could bring these songs that like I wasn't sure if they were good or not. And over the last few years, I've sort of learned to not even worry about that and just trust my intuition, and the idea that if you're working with great musicians, they're going to find like the greatness in a composition, and it doesn't even need to be that incredible on paper, but if you play it with incredible musicians, like magic will happen inevitably.
Are you trying to devote some time these days to writing? Is that a steady pursuit of yours?
I wish I could say that I did it steadily, but I think I'm more of the type of composer where it comes in waves. I haven't really worked on composing the last several months, but if I just need to like lock myself in my office and I will write stuff, but it's just a matter of like finding the time or giving myself the time. The lockdown, like Brad was saying, even though it was a pretty atrocious time for everybody, obviously, the thing that it did grant musicians was the time that we're usually spending running around from gig to gig and rehearsal to rehearsal. We were given all of this time, so I wrote more in the year 2020 than I did probably in any other year combined. And I'm still sort of like parsing out some of those tunes and working them up with other musicians. So yeah, I guess that's all to say that like when given time, the time to sit and write, it will be productive. Yeah.
You do enjoy the experience when you have time to
Very much so.
pursue it. You have you lead a couple of bands. There's some of my favorite band names. The Palindromes
Yes.
is one. Able was I, ere I saw Elba.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
It reads the sentence or phrase, word or phrase, reads the same front and back. Does the music sound the same front and back?
I don't know. I've never listened to it backwards. Should try that.
You got to give it a try.
Yeah, we should try to play a gig backwards maybe next time. Yeah.
Yeah, get the check and then start playing. Tell me a little bit about the Palindromes.
That is a band that also features Brad Walker, and then Doug Garrison is the drummer. Doug, you might know from the Iguanas,
Yeah.
and Chris Alford is the guitarist, who is, like Brad, like one of my closest musical collaborators, and I guess I should say I feel very a close like intuition to how we think about music. I feel very like closely in sync with the way that Chris plays and thinks about music, as well as Brad and a handful of other musicians. But finding those relationships and sort of building upon them over a several year period is something that I'm very thankful that I've been able to do with a few different projects. But Palindromes is a group that I lead that it's kind of 50-50 my compositions and then like cover songs, just tunes that I like to play. But it definitely skews heavy on like Paul Motion, Ornette Coleman, Paul Bley, Carla Bley, like that end of sort of open-ended improvising.
What about the Some Antics?
Some Antics is a trio with guitarist Nahum Zadipple and the drummer Brad Webb, and we've put out an album. Actually, Brad mentioned Jeff Albert. Something that Jeff does that I don't think Brad mentioned is he has ran a independent record label called Breakfast for Dinner, and a lot of us in this music scene here have benefited from that and released music on his label. So Some Antics and the first album by Palindromes and the first album by Extended were all released on Jeff's label. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been just a great force for creativity in the community here.
Agreed.
Well, Palindromes plays still fairly regular schedule, don't you? Or occasion?
I'd say
how often?
irregularly. Yeah.
Irregular.
We
Irregular?
happen to play this week. But we need another gig.
All right. Presenters,
Yeah.
Palindromes available.
Yeah.
You came in 2015. What got you moved to New Orleans?
The desire to get away from cold weather and the music scene drew me here.
Had you visited?
Yeah, I'd only visited once. My then girlfriend, now wife, came to visit for like a week in maybe October 2013, and each really fell in love with the city. I mean, it helped that it was like a gorgeous fall weather, and just went out to see a lot of music and ate a lot of food and met a lot of really wonderful people, and that sort of planted the seed for both of us to get out of the cold, rainy Pittsburgh and move here.
Yeah. And among the people that you ultimately met on a gig or played with, maybe one or two of them, maybe one, not so much the other. It was that Brad Webb had a gig, a trio gig. He needed a bass player, and he called you. It was with Oscar, and out of that came Extended.
Yeah, that's been another one of these long-running projects with people that I just love working with, and with each year that we play together, we just like gain more trust in working with one another, and yeah, it's just a wonderful project to get to be a part of, and we've put out 3 albums and have enough material basically for another one that we'll work on later this year. But that's a collaborative, cooperative trio where all 3 of us write music and bring it in pretty equally. So with 3 composers, it's pretty easy to end up with 10 new songs each year.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Without Notice, the most recent thing, gave you that was that due for release in before or right at the time of the pandemic, but finally came out in 22.
It came out in 2022. The delay that the pandemic caused that recording was the recording of it. I think we had initially booked the session for May of 2022, which was, I think we had booked it for like the last Sunday of Jazz Fest, which, thinking about it, like, was a pretty awful idea, because we would have been real like fresh on playing, but real sleep deprived, and so we pushed that recording back a few months. And again, another one of these benefits of having the time of the lockdown is we were able to rehearse and prepare the music for that record way more than we would have if 2020 was normal and it was recorded the second Sunday of Jazz Fest 2020. So, yeah.
And highly highly recommended. Without Notice is out now. And what label is that on?
We self-released it. No label.
No
Yeah.
label. But you got promotional work from
We did.
crossover.
Yep.
Well, it's a terrific record, and what we need to do right now is hear some more of the music of this Brad Walker trio, ladies and gentlemen. Brad, what are we going to hear next?
To put a bow on that segment, talking about Matt is a really close collaborator, and the way I think about of mine and of many people, someone that makes every organization and ensemble he's a part of stronger and more compelling than it would be if anyone else was playing bass, which I think is a really deep compliment, particularly for a bass player and the role that they often play in music like this. So the way I think of Matt is he's a connector. Connection's something that's really important to me, the music I get to make. Connections between really open, free improvisation and then compositions and structures. That's something I'm super interested in, and that he is too. And also the connections between all the many, many genres of music that are meaningful to me, which, could be straight ahead swing, but also could be, pop music, right? And or an indie songwriter or a folk melody from Israel, So I thought it'd be cool. Normally with this project, we just play. Anything could happen. Because of the format of this, where we're sort of going back and forth, I thought it might be good to have a little bit more of a sketch in mind than we normally do. And so we're going to attempt to combine two very, 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 very different pieces of music that also kind of have a lot in common. And we're going to figure out how to do that right now.
I know at least half of it. You don't know what love is. But don't know the other half. What was the other tune you combined?
You know, I realized we started playing it, so those are not real fond of this human being, so I'm just trying to
Okay.
I'll tell you later.
All right.
Something we borrowed from the pop music sphere.
Johnny, you grew up in our mid-city neighborhood at a time when not everyone, in fact, almost no one had air conditioning at home. So if there was a second line parade, a Mardi Gras parade, a radio show, a record player playing, you were hearing all kind of music just right through the window.
Yeah, I was really lucky that the neighborhood I grew up in had a lot of different kinds of people, you know, as far as where our grandparents were from and where our parents were from, immigrants, there you go. And I grew up with my grandma and my grandpa. They were from Sicily. And the people right next door, just a few feet away through the alley, shotgun houses, everybody had their windows open. They were from Honduras. The next house over with all their windows open, they were from Ireland. Boy, they caused a lot of problems. I thought the Sicilians and the Italians were getting, you know, and the next house over was Italians. You know, and the next, you know, and so on. So I was lucky enough to just walk, you know, a few feet and pass a couple of houses, or walk down a couple of alleys to see who was outside playing, which one of the kids, you know, kids and stuff everywhere.
Right.
All kind of different languages being spoke. Some of the kids didn't speak the language, their mamas and daddies did, so you had that kind of thing going. And the music coming out of everybody's windows was, you know, kind of close to the ethnicity. Plus,
Right.
the new stuff on the AM radio was coming out, so the kids were switching to that. The moms and the dads were switching back to the
Yeah, TIX is coming up
yeah,
on the
you know, to
on the AM.
Spanish
right?
music, or you know. So I mean, yeah, I was lucky to have all of that very you know, outside on your porch, people mixing musics, people mixing languages up, you know, and so all of that I thought was really colorful. Plus, I was in mid-city, and at that time, the parade routes were not so stiff. They had parades all over town, starting in all kind of different places. And about 3 different parades started, you know, at least 3 that I can remember off the top of my head. But anyway, you know, so I you know, as a young kid, man, you know, when those parades started a few blocks, 6 blocks from the house, I could hear those people coming to line up
Right.
before the parade several hours, you know. And on a Saturday or Sunday when I was out in school, man, you know, my grandmother or my uncle who lived with my grandmother also. Everybody lived with my grandmother. And people I didn't even know. And not even related. But they were Sicilian. Anyway, some wasn't. And so, you know, I was immediately drawn to just the air. You know, it had the sound of the people lining up and the drummers beating on stuff before it was even time for the parade. So I was immediately, that magnetic force just, you know, come on, please take me, Uncle, please take me, Grandma. Let's go down there where they line up by the church. You know, he had about 5 blocks. So, you know, I do that. You know, and then when I got old enough to go by myself, my grandma said, go ahead, you know. And so, man, you know, that was just a happy magnet that got me into the whole stomach physical feeling of loving drums.
I remember feeling that in the chest.
Just,
you know,
yeah,
the bass
you
drummer
feel
comes
it
by.
in your chest and your stomach. Boy, and I used to love to go down there and just sit there for hours before the parade started. Listen to them guys beat on drums. And it was kicks, man, and I loved it. And you know, I guess that's what gave me a delicious, beautiful appetite for it.
Did that appetite turn into some actual playing pretty early?
Absolutely, but I let it take its time. You know, nobody was rushing me. Nobody pushed me. Nobody said, do this. Oh, you sound great. Blah, 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 blah. I just did it, and I did it, and I did it, and I just kind of went along with the pack, followed the older guys. They did what they told me to do, and, you know, just, you know, I didn't really have a plan. You know, I just let everybody else make the plan for me, and I said, okay, let's do it. And so, that was
Was drums always their
yes.
thing, or did you try anything
yes.
else?
Drums was always happening. And before college, I had to, learn a lot of other stuff, mallets and, timpani. I had a scholarship for that. And spent some years learning timpani, which is a lot different than drums. It don't look different, but it's a lot different. And a lot of mallets, but I soon put those mallets down the day I finished my senior recital in college, and I destroyed that Bach etude. I said, God, I will never pick up these mallets and play this marimba again, I promise. So,
And they said it was indestructible, but ladies and gentlemen, he did it.
Yeah. God said, shut him down. So, can't hit no wrong notes there, baby.
You hit a lot of mighty right notes, though, John, and you do that in a very orchestrated way. You really play melodies on that kit.
Thank you.
In a beautiful way. And that, I don't know if that's necessarily a New Orleans thing, but I know there's a lot of New Orleans drummers who seem to have that.
I think it's a very linear thing, and I think that the drummers around here, in the beginning, know the simplicity of their part, and I think that they're very attracted to the melodies. So I think, they have a melodious ear. I think the melodies around here, the folk melodies, or the people call them street beat melodies, trad music. I call it folk music, bro. Yeah. But anyway, it's our folk music, and I think those melodies are very attractive. Whether you play drums or whether you work for the Department of Sanitation, the delicious melodies that we have here, and I think they're attractive. They attracted me, so yes, I think that's something that's very indigenous of this region in drummers. Mm-hmm. That they have a tendency to go, from very vertical drumming is very very up and down,
right.
Whereas melody is very horizontal. I think drummers around here can really get the rhythm in a very linear, horizontal, melodic rhythm fashion, in addition to having what I call harmonic rhythm, melodic rhythm. One's vertical, one's horizontal, and for me that's really important, the melodic rhythm, and for me
right.
that's,
And you use all kind of tools to get that. Every part of the stick, every part of the brush, every part of the cymbal, every part of the drum.
Yeah, what's available, but mostly, you got to have that melody somewhere in your stomach or your chest, and really, that's got to be like the thing that you really are, devoted to. That's what you're doing. You're not doing this. You're doing this, man. You're following that song, that melody, the variations on the melody that are instantly being created and improvised. You have to have that. It can't be that. It can't be that. It really has to be, what is he doing? What is he doing? Where's he going? Where's he going? Why am I here? Why am I there? You know? Very little has to do with the drums. It has to do more with the music, as a drummer.
Right. Al Boletto was a major influence in your life, a great band leader and saxophonist and composer. How did you meet Mr. Boletto?
We met when I was in college. They had these college festivals, tri-state, national level, all of that kind of stuff. And when I was a freshman in college, he was a judge at one of the festivals. And our Loyola band had played, and our Loyola quartet had played, and I played in drums in both. And after those proceedings for that afternoon were done, he came around the backstage, and Joe Hebert, who was the director of a lot of stuff, high school and college for me, in life. He said, Al Boletto wants to meet you. And I said, okay, cool. I was young. I was like, just turned 18, Oh, hi. I said, you're a good drummer. And, that was cool. Then by the time I was 19, I got a call to play with Willie T and Chuck Beatty at the Playboy Club, because they had double shows, and only Al Boletto's band could cover one penthouse with the show. And so he hired me, Willie T, and Chuck Beatty to do the other show room. And that was when I first started working at the Playboy Club as a sub, you know. Then I subbed down for Alboletto, not for him, but for the band that was playing funk and rock downstairs while his band was playing jazz and shows upstairs. And so, you know, then when he needed a sub, he called me. Then I auditioned for the gig one time and didn't get it. They hired another guy. So I left town. I went to Las Vegas. I was working out there. Got a phone call 6 months later in Las Vegas with Alboletto. Said, "We want you to play the Playboy Club." I said, "Bro, I already auditioned for that. You didn't want me. You got the other cases." "No, we changed our minds." I said, "Oh, bro, I'm out here in Las Vegas." My intention was to move to Los Angeles and study with Shelly Manne and be a big-time studio musician. That was my goal in life. And, well, I got as far as Las Vegas, and I said, "No, Al, I'm going to California." He clicked, called me back the next day. "How's this amount of money sound?" And, you know, so that went on, you know. And plus, there was a Vietnam thing happening at the time, and I could have did one or two things. I could have either went in service or I could have jumped back in school. So I told Alboletto, "Yes, I'm going to come back to New Orleans and be the house drummer for you." And I slowly got back in school, and I stayed the house drummer for 5 years, learned a whole lot, went through a whole lot of musicians, and Alboletto was there the whole time. And he became really you know, he was like a dad, a brother.
Yeah.
You know, he was like all of that, you know.
Yeah.
Then I found out later that before I was born, he was dating my mother. And he had a convertible. So you know what that meant, right?
Oh,
A
man,
convertible
backseat.
in the 30s. Oh, my God. My mama. Oh. I said, "Mom, how old were you?" She said, "I was 17, 18. Oh, Mama, you don't know Alboletto." She said, "Yeah, I do." We never went out again. I knew Alboletto.
You say that with real conviction.
Yeah.
Yes. When did you meet Tony DeGrati and get involved with that Astral Project?
Tony
thing,
moved to town, I think, in the early mid-'70s, and he listened to the cats around town, you know, became friends, and said, "I got some music. I want to put a band together just to play for fun." It's sort of like fusion jazz music, kind of, and we go, you know, we ain't going to get a gig with that. But, yeah, we want to have some fun. You know, who's this new cat? Tony DeGrati. "Oh, he's cool. Okay, he plays So we got together, had a rehearsal. We all liked each other. We loved the music. It was a whole lot of fun. It was very open. He let us do what we wanted. And the next thing was we started working Lou gigs at Lou and Charlie's, and, you know, like everybody else. Right. And, you know, it just never fell apart. It was more of a fun band, and it was a band that we ever thought we ever could make any money, which we really never did make any big money. But, you know, we still play together, and we still have more fun than we ever had. Yeah. So it was fun from Jump Street. You know, even though we cut a lot of great records, we've been around the world a couple of times and all of that, it really wasn't like, you know, what you call a star band. You know, you wasn't in it to be a star or make a whole lot of money. You were in it because you loved the music and the guys, and that was that. And the surprises.
Oh, yeah, and 45 years later, they're still happening.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You say 45, I say 50, but it's a big argument in the band about that.
All
the cats are too senile to even remember, you know? I'm the oldest, and I remember more than all of them. They're going, "Really? When did that happen?" I said, "Bro, don't you remember the time I was getting the stuff out the van and you fell right out the back of the van with the whole food all over you?" "Oh, no, bro, I don't remember that." I said, "Well, I do. It was my food, bro."
One remembers that, yeah. So that's been a great run with those guys. And,
Still is.
It's still a great band.
Is.
Still a great band. Well, I think we got time for one more tune, gentlemen. What do you say?
St. Thomas.
Sonny Rollins, St. Thomas. That's Johnny Budakovich at the drums, cymbals, brushes, sticks, ladies and gentlemen. At the bass, Mr. Matt Booth. Over here on saxophones, Brad Walker, the Brad Walker Trio. And by the way, you can catch Johnny with his trio at the Maple Leaf Bar up 8316 Oak Street tonight, 8 o'clock, featuring the great young trumpeter John Michael Bradford. You can catch Matt and his quintet at Chicky-Wawa on next Tuesday, I think it is, the 10th. And Brad and Matt and possibly Johnny at Snug Harbor on Sunday the 15th.
We haven't asked Johnny yet, but we're about to. But
I gotta call my wife.
excuse me, we haven't asked Deborah yet, but we're going to.
Yes. Check with the boss.
We're doing the music of Keith Jarrett at Snug Harbor, sort of a last-minute booking, and I thought that'd be a nice way to make that happen. So we're going to do the music of Keith Jarrett called Mysteries at Snug Harbor, not this Sunday, but next Sunday.
All right. So chances to see these gentlemen and other ensembles, or perhaps all together, once again at Snug. Thanks for joining us here today for Talkin' Jazz, and we look forward to seeing you back here on our next session, which will be February 9th, again a Thursday afternoon at 2. Good. See you then.
Please give it up for Fred Kasten, y'all. Fred Kasten and the Brad Walker Trio. Just want to shout out again the National Park Service. Thank you for coming to our programs. Please visit 419 Decatur down at our site. We want to thank you for coming to the New Orleans Jazz Museum. If you're interested in any more National Park Service program, visit nps.gov/jazz. And if you're interested in New Orleans Jazz Museum programs, visit nolajazzmuseum.org. Again, that was Fred Kasten and the Brad Walker Trio.
Thank you, Jade.